Hi, my name is Thomas, and we're listening to a song composed by Schubert. Please forgive my German accent, but it's called Ständchen, which means serenade. It is a romantic, lyrical, and tragic poem that Schubert transposed into a song. Schubert was ill when he wrote the melody for the serenade, and he finished it in October 1828, 1 month before dying at the age of 31. This context seems to reinforce the tragedy of the song, in which the poet implores and begs his lover to make him happy. The Serenade is the fourth piece of a collection called Schwanengesang, which means swan song. This name was given by Schubert's publisher after his death and was never known by Schubert. Traditionally, a swan song is a symbolic expression referring to an artist's ultimate masterpiece, a divine creation in the face of death. In Greek mythology, the swan is one of Apollo's symbols associated with music, poetry, prophecy, and so forth. The expression swan song refers explicitly to several myths, one of them being written by Aesop in the 6th century BC. In one of his tales, Aesop recounts, a swan, threatened with death, burst forth into song, and thus made himself known by his voice and preserved his life by his melody. The symbolism behind the song seems to participate heavily in the listener's appreciation. Nietzsche, less known as a musician and composer, warns us against symbolism in art, and especially music. Suppose you enjoyed listening to a piece of music or contemplating any other piece of art that you find meaningful. It might not be because the artwork contains any important or scientific truth. In other words, our appreciation doesn't mean that the said work is really profoundly beautiful, but as listeners, we're moved by our own intellectual and cultural interpretations, by the symbols that we attach to art. In music, we attach symbols to rhythm, varying volumes, harmonies. We then make suppositions about music's depth and authenticity beyond the simple fact that it's pleasant to our ears. Speaking of a passage of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Nietzsche says that it will make the listener feel he is hovering above the earth in a dome of stars with the dream of immortality in his heart. All the stars seem to glitter around him, and the earth seems to sink farther and farther away. But Nietzsche warns us against these kinds of images. We shouldn't think that the Ninth Symphony describes a dome of stars, as this interpretation can only be found in ourselves. Yet, we tend to omit the role symbols play in our appreciation of art and music, which goes hand in hand with the Western cult of geniuses. There is an obsession in Western Europe and North America to refer as geniuses a specific tradition of musicians considered as higher men whose works encapsulate essential truths. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, and a few others, almost all German. We become highly superstitious and want to hear something mystical in Schubert's last musical breaths. The tragedy and lyricism become intrinsic to the melody itself. To understand this music tradition and how music is thought of and taught today, it's worth reading Philip Eal's works. He is an American professor of music theory at Hunter College, and he analyzed how European music is traditionally white supremacist and for many reasons. Eal dissects the influence of Heinrich Schenker on contemporary music. Schenker, who died in the 1930s, was a German music theorist and a teacher who published major music textbooks that are used still today. Schenker analyzed music systems and was particularly fond of the word genius, which he reserved for a handful of German and European musicians, the one that we quoted, who epitomized the German spirit. Schenker was a white supremacist who claimed that music and people were ruled by similar laws and hierarchies. In music, he dedicated numerous works on complex tonal variations and hierarchies, which he used to explain the greatness of the geniuses. He very explicitly referred to these geniuses as examples of German artistic and moral superiority, promoting race hierarchies and explicitly agreeing with Hitler's views. Schenker is part of a tradition in Europe and North America, which considers European musical standards of the 18th and 19th centuries to be based on scientific truths.
Philip Ewell explains how these beliefs use science and logic to make music statements.
These archaic beliefs refer to medieval theories
defining music as maths and time the same way that geometry is considered to be maths and space.
Today, this tradition uses its own musical language to try to understand or exclude any other music genres. For instance,
Ben Shapiro represents how Shanker's legacy can be used for identity and nationalist discourse in the US.
Shapiro, a famously conservative and highly controversial columnist, has claimed that rap was not music, but only rhythmic speaking. Ben Shapiro quoted his music teacher, who defined music according to laws of harmony, melody, and rhythm, in which rap doesn't fit apparently. Similar arguments have been made in the past about jazz, and both rap and jazz are examples of music genres that couldn't be explained with classical and so-called universal music laws. As a counterexample, there are numerous concepts in other traditions which don't have any equivalents in Western music theory. For example, Indian music theories are often more precise, differentiating subtle frequencies that don't have names in classical music and having more notes, which are called swaras. Indian music is embedded in philosophy and acknowledges symbolism, having melodic modes that are called rags, associated with different times of the day. If you want more technical explanations, you should read Philip Ewell's works on Western music and white supremacy. Ewell describes specifically and technically the assumptions that Schenker and most Western musicians make about tonal variation, structure, rhythm, and etc. Let's finish with an extract of Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 14 in C-sharp minor, best known as Moonlight Sonata. This name was, like Schwanengesang, only given after his death, and other interpretations preferred to talk about death and grief. What do you think this sonata truly means?